Ignition sequence start.
Good morning and welcome to Mission Control Houston. You're looking at the Orbit 2 team of flight controllers in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. These are the folks monitoring the systems on the station and assisting the Expedition 59 crew members through a busy day of experiment operations. Some of those experiments are brand new on board, having arrived early this week on a cargo ship, which is now the 6th space vehicle parked at one of the space station's docking ports.
Welcome to Space to Ground. I'm Leah Cheshire. This week, a Dragon arrived to the space station for a month-long stay. On May 4th, SpaceX launched their 17th commercial resupply mission to the space station. This Dragon capsule, which flew to the station once before on SpaceX's 12th resupply mission, arrived to the orbiting laboratory on May 6th, bringing with it about 5,500 pounds of supplies. Canadian Space Agency astronaut David St. Jacques commanded the Canadarm2 to grapple the spacecraft. Then, ground controllers berthed the vehicle to the station's Harmony module, where it will remain for about a month. Astronauts will spend the next few weeks unpacking and reloading Dragon for an eventual safe splashdown. We know it's important to take our vitamins, and future astronauts might be getting them from an unexpected source. The microalgae study is looking at a tiny freshwater green algae that is capable of producing a powerful antioxidant when stressed. Researchers believe exposing it to microgravity could stress the algae into producing this antioxidant, which has been shown to support the immune system and could protect against the effects of radiation exposure, eye damage, cardiovascular system damage, and bone loss. Something like this could be a critical dietary boost as we send humans on longer and longer space missions and set our sights on returning astronauts to the moon by 2024. This week's question comes from Renee, who asks if Dragon is the 6th vehicle to dock at the space station and if there's room for any more. As a matter of fact, there is. On Monday, Dragon became the 6th vehicle currently docked to the station, joining Cygnus 11, Soyuz 11 and 12, and Progress 71 and 72. One more parking spot will be available for commercial crew vehicles Starliner and Crew Dragon on the forward-facing port, where the space shuttle docks before. Keep sending in your questions using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll see you next week.
The previous Dragon cargo ship arrived at the International Space Station last December, and it delivered a new experiment that's now in place on the outside of the station, on the Kibo Laboratories exposed facility. From that vantage point, a laser light is pointed down to tree canopies on the planet to study Earth's ecosystem for scientists who want to learn more about how it's changing.
Shining laser light on Earth's forests. Presented by Science at NASA. The International Space Station, or ISS, is sporting a new light fixture. The Global Ecosystem Dynamics Investigation, or JEDI, will beam down laser light on Earth from the orbiting laboratory to reveal more about our environment and how it is changing. NASA's JEDI sends laser pulses into tree canopies and precisely measures the light reflected back. The timing and intensity of light that bounces back to JEDI's telescope will reveal the height and density of trees and vegetation, and the vertical arrangement of the leaves and branches within the overall canopy. Dr. Ralph Dabaya, JEDI Principal Investigator at the University of Maryland, says, "This instrument will map forests in high resolution and 3 dimensions, revolutionizing the way researchers monitor them. Forested areas are an important part of our planet. Not only do forests provide a habitat for many species and a source of raw materials for human use, such as paper and lumber, they also play a key role in the Earth's carbon cycle. Deforestation and forest degradation, in addition to other types of forest disturbances, such as fires and insect outbreaks, lead to increases in atmospheric carbon dioxide. Forest regrowth sucks that carbon back down into trees and soils. Knowing how forests grow and change over time can allow us to better understand the contribution that forests make to Earth's carbon cycle and help people better manage this important resource. JEDI is the first spaceborne instrument designed specifically to perform sustained mapping of the spatial distribution of the carbon content of forests. Dabaya notes, one of the most poorly quantified components of the carbon cycle is the net balance between forest disturbance and regrowth. JEDI will help scientists fill in this missing piece by revealing the vertical structure of the forest, information we really can't get with sufficient accuracy any other way. JEDI will provide scientists with insights into the amount of carbon stored in forests. When combined with current and historical records of changes captured by Earth-orbiting satellites, such as Landsat, this information will enhance the ability of researchers to identify changes happening across our planet. Researchers also will incorporate JEDI's observations, along with those of the EcoStress instrument on the station, with data from other current and future Earth-observing sensors. These data will address important questions about relationships between forest structure, function, composition, and changes in carbon content. Combining all of these data will allow researchers to gain an unprecedented understanding of ecosystem dynamics and the role plants and trees play in Earth's global carbon cycle. These new insights could be used in turn to improve models for forecasting future ecosystem changes, atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations, and climate. JEDI was launched to the station aboard SpaceX CRS-16 on December 5, 2018. For more about how NASA uses the power of light to understand our world and beyond, visit science.nasa.gov.
There's also science underway now on the International Space Station that could provide insight to treat and prevent Parkinson's disease, which affects more than 5 million people. Recently, astronaut Alexander Gerst of the European Space Agency worked on an experiment with a particular protein crystal that may hold important insights. NASA astronaut Serena Aunen-Chancellor walked us through what that was like.
Welcome to Expedition 57 on board the International Space Station. Today we're doing some really cool science. This is Alex Gerst over here with me, and we are working on Parkinson's disease. What we're looking at here is a special protein kinase, or protein crystal structure. And the reason scientists have sent it up here to the International Space Station is because these protein crystals tend to grow larger and of much better quality. Parkinson's is a disease that affects over 5 million people worldwide, and scientists are constantly searching for a cure. And what we discovered was that here in the microgravity environment, these crystals really like to grow. So if scientists can better elucidate or clarify the structure, then they're better able to develop an inhibitor drug for Parkinson's. And not only an inhibitor drug, but an inhibitor drug with very few side effects. So what Alex is doing here today is he's obviously working on the wall, is what it seems like here in microgravity, and he is. He's got a microscope above him, and he's got a plate that he filled with this special protein crystal structure just a few days ago. Gave time for those structures to crystallize, and now he's examining them under the microscope. And he's actually interacting real time with the principal investigator on the ground to look at the crystal structure, to help improve the lighting and the clarity, and then also take pictures, which will then be sent back down to the ground. So here on board Expedition 57, we're very proud to be taking part in this experiment. I think in the past few years, scientists have realized that the microgravity environment is such a unique environment to grow things like cells or protein crystals, and it provides a new way to help us look at diseases in a better way, to help us develop new medications for these diseases, and so we're happy to be taking part in this science up here.
A tool that helped guide sailors across the oceans for centuries is being tested on board the International Space Station. In this experiment, researchers are looking into the use of a handheld sextant as a potential navigation tool to guide spacecraft across the cosmos.
astronaut lines up a known star and a prominent landmark, and feeding his readings into the computer, gets his position back from the machine.
John's pointing right now at the Sextant and a telescope, which are our navigation means to get home.
As we travel farther out into space, clever solutions to problems like engine part malfunctions will be a vital part of NASA's preparations. 3D printing is an emerging technology that may be used to create custom mission-critical parts. But first, we've got to understand how particle shape, size, and distribution affect the manufacturing process. One particular study is helping explore these factors.
Things they're going to have to do for space exploration is do additive manufacturing, because we may have an engine part that fails, and you're certainly not going to take up spare engine parts. You're going to have to manufacture them there. And a lot of what we want to do with that means looking at microscopic particles, because they're building blocks. And now I think a big part of the future in this field, and for lots of different reasons, is active materials. So now we have ways that instead of just the particles being just particles, we can activate them, we can functionalize them, we can get them to associate with one another specifically. So one of the things we're aiming for is active self-replication, evolution in microgravity, to put lots of things together and to optimize properties using evolutionary processes from not living things, but mimicking what living things have done so successfully. We'll learn how to do that on Earth eventually. But before we do that, it's much better, because they have different densities, to do it in microgravity. It's always really important to do something at the forefront of science that will then become a forefront in engineering and production.
The astronauts on the International Space Station spend a good chunk of their time as lab assistants on experiments in a whole range of scientific disciplines, as the Expedition 59 crew members have been doing this week. But astronauts also devote time to sharing the experience of spaceflight with people on the ground, particularly when they talk with students and their teachers about science, technology, engineering, and math. In this installment of the STEMonstrations video series, astronaut and former classroom teacher Joe Acaba gets into the difference between kinetic energy and potential energy and demonstrates how one can become the other.
Welcome to the International Space Station. I'm astronaut Joe Acaba. Today, we're going to talk about potential and kinetic energy. Let's get started. Kinetic energy is the energy an object has because of its motion. An object can store energy based on its position. This is called potential energy. On Earth, imagine dropping an object from a raised position. As an object's altitude above the Earth's surface increases, its gravitational potential energy also increases. The potential energy stored due to its position is now being converted to kinetic energy. We also observe this with elastic potential energy.
Okay, new term. Elastic potential energy occurs when objects are compressed and stretched, or generally deformed in any manner, creating potential energy. Think of this bungee or a spring. Okay, Joe, what's next?
We pull back on the band and create potential energy. When we release the potential energy, is converted to kinetic energy. Here on the International Space Station, we are still under the influence of gravity, primarily due to our position with the Earth. So when I have this ball on this ramp, normally back on Earth, I release the ball and it rolls down the ramp due to a change in its potential energy that's being transferred to kinetic energy. But as you can see, it doesn't happen here. So it doesn't mean we don't have potential energy. It just means we're not converting it at this time to kinetic energy. And why is that? Gravity is pulling us down, but we're moving super fast. And so what it is we're bending around the Earth in this perpetual falling motion. Thanks for joining me on board the International Space Station. We're sending it back to Earth so you can try your own experiment. See you next time.
This demonstration videos are one way that the astronauts on the International Space Station try to share their mission with students on Earth. Last summer, during a special live event with students at the Challenger Centers, astronaut and former classroom teacher Ricky Arnold shared a video in which he performed one of the lost lessons that Krista McAuliffe had planned for her flight on the Space Shuttle Challenger, which launched 33 years ago. Let's have a look.
Hi there, my name is Ricky Arnold and I'm living and working on the International Space Station as a part of Expedition 55. Today we're experimenting with chromatography. Chromatography is a technique for the separation of a mixture into its individual components. Let's go ahead and get started. We have a mixture, this black spot, on a piece of chromatography paper. We want to see what different components of light make up black. So we put in the water onto this end of the chromatography paper to see how the ink separates. Water is a universal solvent and should help separate the spots into colors. What do you think is going to happen? Talk about it with your classmates. All right, now let's see what happens. I'll go ahead and add some water. Here's the first one. Water is going ahead and creeping up the chromatography paper. You can already start to see not much separation here. Very little on this black one, but you can actually see the reds, greens, and yellows starting to separate and make their way up the chromatography paper. The substances, now in liquid form, travel over the solid, the paper, at different speeds, causing them to separate into the component parts. Now that we know what black ink separates into, let's think about how the water was able to move through the paper. I put a drop of water in just one spot, but as you can see, it moved along the paper on its own. How does it do that? Well, it happens through a process called capillary action. Capillary action is when a liquid like water moves upward due to its cohesive and adhesive properties. In other words, water molecules are able to essentially stick together and stick to one another, which is cohesion. And they can also stick to a surface or a container, in this case the paper, in a process called adhesion, and that adhesion pushes it upwards. This happens in microgravity and on Earth. You could try another experiment with chromatography with your parents or your teacher. Grind up some green leaves into a real fine pulp and use some acetone or nail polish remover instead of the water. Leaves are green because they have a chemical called chlorophyll in them, a chemical that can use sunlight to make sugar and oxygen through a process called photosynthesis. However, there are other chemicals in leaves that do the same job, but we just don't see them until fall when the chlorophyll breaks apart. Another way to see fall colors any time of year is to use chromatography. Well, now that we've done this experiment in microgravity, think about how this might look different on Earth. Will the material setup be the same? Will water behave in the same way? Will the same separations happen? Discuss it with a friend, then give it a try. Thanks for participating in our experiment today. I'm Ricky Arnold. We'll see you next time.
Flight engineer Christina Cook is now 8 weeks into her mission, which is currently planned to stretch until February of next year. She says the concentration and control she learned in one of her favorite pastimes, mountain climbing, helped her prepare to be an astronaut and to make the climb to space for her first mission to the International Space Station.
I first got involved in rock climbing actually in college. My college, North Carolina State University, offered rock climbing as a PE class. So it sounded really exciting, maybe a way to kind of get outside and have a little adventure. When I first got started, I liked more the physical challenge. That's what it was about. And as I kind of advanced in the hobby and got more technical, I found that I really liked other aspects of it, like the equipment, the gear, the physics of the system that you have to use, and also the partnership aspect of it. It's really like a team, because when you get into some of the higher levels of climbing and different types of more technical climbing, you really rely on your climbing partner. We train for spacewalks in a giant pool that's called the NBL, which stands for Neutral Buoyancy Lab. And it's a pool that's large enough to fit a full-scale mock-up of the International Space Station. So in that, we simulate everything like we would on a real EVA, including egressing out of the airlock, your safety tethers, and your local tethers that you would work when you're at a work site performing the job. So all of that is just very similar to the concepts of rock climbing. So during my astronaut interview, the most memorable question that I had from the interview committee came from Peggy Whitson, who, as you know, is a famous astronaut for having the longest time in space. She's done many, many spacewalks. She's a hero of mine. And she looked at me and she said, "When you rock climb, have you ever been scared?" And I felt like she was seeing right to my soul when she asked that question. And I feel like the answer to that question was absolutely, I have been scared. And that's when I really kind of found the fact that turning that fear that you might be having into focus is so important. And I think that's what she was drawing on when she asked that question. So that was a pretty profound moment in my selection process. I'm Christina Cook, and I'm an astronaut.
A big part of the mission of the International Space Station is to get people ready to go beyond Earth orbit in the years to come, starting with going back to the moon by 2024. Around the world in late 2018 and so far this year, NASA's Orion, Space Launch System, and Exploration Ground Systems programs made huge strides in developing and building the spacecraft, rocket, and infrastructure necessary to send humans to deep space destinations, including the moon and beyond. Have a look. If you'd like to get another look at any of the stories we featured today, check us out on YouTube and Facebook. There are the addresses conveniently displayed. And while you're at those spots, take a look around, because there's a lot of other cool stuff you can find about NASA and America's human spaceflight program. And while you're out there bumping around on the internet, check out Houston, we have a podcast. It's folks here at NASA talking about their work in all aspects of space exploration. We post the brand new episodes on Fridays, and today it is part 4 of the Heroes Behind the Heroes series, with the story of how the team turned 19,000 hours of digitized audio of the Apollo mission control team into transcripts. And also how you can access the audio and the transcripts online yourself right now. Go to nasa.gov/podcasts. You'll find today's episode, which is number 91, plus parts 1, 2, and 3, and all of our previous episodes, as well as the full library of all the NASA podcasts. And all of that's also available for you on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and SoundCloud. This is Mission Control, Houston.